My name is Tony Phillips, and I am from Alexandria, Kentucky. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I identify as a cis gay male. Well, Alexandria actually is part of Greater Cincinnati, so we're about 25 minutes south of the river, and so have always been involved kind of in things on both sides of the river. Yeah, so I'm a Cincinnati native, and I, right out of college, started as an intern at the local Fox TV station, and did that for 20 years, worked my way up into various positions, and then since then I have moved on to being a project manager in the clinical research space. I started at Fox 19 in 1989, so I was there to launch The Simpsons. That's how old I am. Yeah, so I consider myself a late bloomer, and I was 33 when I came out, and most of what delayed that was my own internalized negative feelings. When I was in high school, I was the kid who was always called slurs, and the last thing I wanted was for them to be right, and so I found every reason to think, they're not right, it's this, it's that. And I'll never forget, I had a moment in right before I turned 30, or right after I turned 30, where I was in the shower one morning and I'm like, you've got a great house, you've got a great life, you've got a great car, you've got a great job, you've got everything you ever wanted. Why are you not happy? And this little voice inside my head said, you know why you're not happy. Because until you accept yourself, you're never going to be happy. And it was almost like ice melting, or it was like this epiphany moment. I mean, I know that sounds melodramatic and I don't mean it to, but it really was. From the moment I started accepting myself, I was comfortable with me for the first time in my life. And that was an amazing feeling. And it wasn't long after that I went to my first Cincinnati Pride. Back then, I think it was still called Equinox Pride. And it was when they had first moved it to downtown Cincinnati. And my husband and I were dating at the time. And I remember turning to him saying, I got to get involved with this. And because that was the point at which I was transitioning out of my job in television, which was very promotions and marketing based, to a job that was way more the other side of my brain, very details, but very dry. And I was looking for an outlet that I could express creativity, but also support the community, because I felt like I knew I wasn't the only one that was late in coming out or that was struggling with their identity. And I wanted to be part of that visibility that said, it's okay. We're here and it's okay. And I really liked what Cincinnati Pride was becoming. So at that time, it was produced by the Gay Chamber of Cincinnati, and I contacted them, and they said, why don't you come on in, and we'll talk to you. So I'll never forget, it was like a job interview. And so I joined them, and I started producing their newsletter, which I did for about 10 years total, and was involved in a couple of the Prides then. And so I was part of the first Pride that moved it from downtown on Fountain Square to at Sawyer Point. And I was able to help these two really amazing ladies who were the co-chairs that year. And it was kind of like their backup, since I was involved in the chamber and this was part of the chamber. And so it's part of that whole transition where Cincinnati Pride became its own entity. And so I really have this sense of pride, pardon the expression, about where the organization has gone. I mean, the team that is running Pride today is so amazing, and you know they're fulfilling things that we could only dream of as we were getting started, because it has picked up such momentum. And what was at first hard for us to deal with was we did that first Pride downtown, and we at Sawyer Point, and we thought, okay, it'll be this big. It ended up being this big, and so the next year we were prepared for that, and it was this big, and that seems to have happened every year. And last year it was incredible, I think, because we were the first year post-pandemic where we really got to get together again. And it was insanely large. And so this team that are running it today, I have such great respect for them, because you know they took this little germ that all of us had kind of built upon over the years, and it's just turned into something that we can all be proud of. So I got involved with the Gay Chamber in 2011. And 2011 was the second of 2 years, because I believe 2010 was the first year, check my math, that we were in Fountain Square. And then I was involved in that second year. That was my first Pride, was 2011. And then 2012 was the first year that we moved to Sawyer Point. And it was also the year that we debuted what I now consider the iconic Cincinnati Pride logo, which again, I'm so impressed with the team because I don't know if you've seen it yet, but they have a new logo for this year and it is gorgeous. And it builds upon what we had done before in a couple of ways. It shows more of the city and kind of shows both sides of the river. And it also shows more of the pride colors than we've ever done before. So I'm just so in awe of them. They've done such an amazing job.
Do you remember who those two lady co-chairs were?
I sure do. Kathy Rogers and Erica Dufresne. And they did an amazing job because that first year, it was pretty nerve-wracking. And they were the co-chairs for the first 3 years that we were at Fountain Square. I'm sorry. Let me read that again. Take two of the first 3 years that we were at Sawyer Point. One of the things we face as a gay chamber, and this is going to get into all the legalese, so all the accountants who are watching can now perk up because this part's for you. We could not be a 501c3 as a chamber because chambers cannot be. Chambers of commerce by nature what they are for commerce, right? And so that kind of held us back a little bit, especially when we would go out and talk to major corporations who were like, well, I can give you this much, but I can't give you more because you're not a 501c3. So that whole process of becoming a 501c3, again, a different name that was really instrumental in that was Sean Baker, and really leading us into becoming our own 501c3 and basically becoming our own organization. And so that's when that happened. I want to say I think that was Kathy and Erica's last year. So I want to say that would have been like 2014 when that happened. The trajectory from there was just amazing because it did open up a lot of other avenues for the organization. So the support in this town has been amazing. I'll tell one little story. We had a year where Kroger had always been a really big sponsor for us. And we had one year where another sponsor, we had a weird thing with the calendar and it messed up with having them too close because we'd gone from July to June and put two in the same fiscal year for a big sponsor. And Kroger stepped up and Kroger said, well, wait a minute, we'll pick up the slack. And so, I mean, and that's just one example. I mean, I could give you so many examples. An example of our contact with Tri-Health saying, the bishop called me in to ask me why I would want to support Cincinnati Pride. And I fought for you guys, and they've been a sponsor for many years. And so it just goes to show you that, the community in and of itself has seen a value in what Pride brings. So I started out just doing the newsletter. I was happy with just doing that. And then over the years, I eventually served a term as president. And then was very happy to pass that off. So it's a lot of responsibility. And so I spent, about 10 years involved with the chamber altogether. And then other things I've done, I served for a while on the P-Flag board and Cincinnati Pride, obviously. And I was really, again, I'm going to, probably something that'll end up on the editing room floor, but I was really proud of taking the newsletter from something that, was hardly ever going out anymore and really revitalizing it and making it something you could count on once a month, every month that you would receive it. And when I left it, it was just one of those things that I had other things going on in my life where I couldn't do it anymore. I've been so proud of the chamber, which is now called Prism. If you don't know that, it's called Prism now. It picked right up. It didn't miss a beat. And, I still read the newsletter every month and I'm still impressed. I mean, it's gotten better and better. So again, there's a lot of pride there for me personally that, wow, this thing that I really loved, it's kind of like putting your kid out in the world and hoping they can survive on their own. And they did. So I almost feel guilty in a way because a lot of the big fighting that happened, I shouldn't use the word fighting, but the struggle in the early 90s to repeal Issue 3 and so forth, that all happened while I was still hiding in my closet. And so, over the years, I have seen, just in general, the acceptance of who we are, and the acceptance of our place grow and grow and grow. And again, a lot of that has been through watching the acceptance of Pride and the different organizations who want to be a part of supporting Pride. It's also been, it takes me back a lot the last couple of years. Especially with what's going on right now with the Don't Say Gay bills, the anti-trans bills, and the ban on drag or restriction on drag. I mean, I'm going to tell a little story again. It'll be on the editing room floor. But as a Kentuckian, when we went through the pandemic, our governor, who's a Democratic governor, just happens to be a Christian Democratic governor, really was a great light for us while we were struggling through the pandemic. He used to do these afternoon news conferences in the height of the pandemic, and he'd start everyone by saying and signing, "We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together." And I felt it really made me respect him a lot. So when these bills started going through Kentucky, knowing that he's going through an election year next year, I kind of thought, I have to come to terms with the fact that I can forgive him if he just signs this bill because they're going to override his veto and he doesn't want to lose more voters. I'll be disappointed, but I could forgive him because of knowing what he's going through. He didn't. I don't know if you saw his statement, but he vetoed that bill and he very eloquently explained why, including his perspective not only as a politician, as a Democrat, but as a Christian. And I thought that was so brave of him. And then again this week, they did do what we expected. They vetoed it. It's going to become law. And that's the don't say gay / anti-trans. So the last couple of years have been very disconcerting. And I think we've got a renewed need for us to be visible, for us to lead with respect and show people that even when we deal with people who are treating us with hate, we're going to come back with love because only love is going to win. But I think it's really important that we all be there. But my very first experience at going to a gay bar was right across the street here. We're in Northside. We're right across the street at a place at that time was called Jacobs on the Avenue. And then after that it became Bronze. And that was my first time. I think everyone who's struggling with coming out has this weird feeling like the first time they go into a gay bar, everyone's going to recognize them and everyone they've ever known is going to drive by that street as they come out. And I certainly had that anxiety in spades for, as long as it took me to accept myself. But that's not what I found when I got inside. And I found a real sense of just community and friendship. And I loved to play euchre. And they used to host euchre nights once a week. And so I would go to their euchre nights. When Jacobs went goodbye, then it moved to the Crazy Fox in Newport. They would do euchre. Was a really big fan of Below Zero and the Cabaret. Those were an awful lot of fun. These days, I find myself hanging out mostly at Bar 901 because all the people I have known for years will tend to go there. And I actually think we're very lucky in Cincinnati because, you hear of the demise of the quote unquote gay bar all across the country. And we've got our share of ones that have come and gone. If you ever want to see a list of those, you can just go to Bar 901 because they have this really cool poster on the back of the wall. There's a list of the names of all the bars that preceded them, which I think is a really cool monument. So I forget where I was going with that. But I think we're actually kind of lucky because, we continue to have places that open and thrive. When Below Zero went away, I was so crushed. Bloom came along and I was skeptical. I'm like, Then I went and I'm like, oh my God, this is really cool. They've done a nice job of doing something different here and fun. It's not just a redo. And so I feel like we're really lucky because so many cities have lost that. And we still seem to have that. Of course, it could just be what Mark Twain said about Cincinnati. It might take longer for it to get here. But we're very lucky that we have it still. I'm proud. I came here when it was the Serpent. In fact, when Tillies opened, and the first time I went into the men's room, I'm like, oh my God, the money that Nigel must have dropped just to clean up this bathroom. So it's insane because this place is gorgeous. Yeah, that place was cool too in its own way.
Where did you happen?
Okay, so we tell people we met each other at a church picnic. But we actually met online. Back before that was fashionable, back before there were any apps, we met on AOL. And we met, and I'll never forget when we met the first time, and I thought, oh, he's really cute. And then when we met the second time and he asked for my phone number, I was like, oh, now wait a minute. Could I be getting this lucky? And yeah, so we've been together for 22 years now. So.
Wow, the early days of AOL. What year was that
that we met in 2001. I know. It doesn't feel like 20-something years ago to me. It doesn't. Yeah, you know what? Let me share one more thing that I didn't share. Because I was kind of self-editing. But, I mentioned I came out late. And I came out late. And at the time that I came out, I was married to someone else. opposite sex. Really great woman. And of course that made it even difficult to come out because, I obviously love her. And I had been carrying around this phone number that was in the back of City Beat in my wallet for months. It was for the Gay Married Men Support Group. And I really would be remiss if I didn't mention this, because if it had not been for that group, I don't think I would be as well adjusted or living the life I'm living today. They used to hold their meetings over at the old AVOC, which was what preceded Stop AIDS. I think it was their first name, over on Central Avenue, not far from here. Central Parkway, sorry. And I sat out in that parking lot that first night. I think they met at 7. I sat out in the parking lot saying to myself, okay, you're going to go in there, and it's going to be this group of Nelly queens all hitting on each other, and you're going to know that this is not who you are. So I went in, and what they would typically do with a new member is they'd kind of go around and they would tell their stories. And as each person, some of them older than me, some of them about my age, some of them younger than me, as they went around and told their stories, I would hear for the first time, coming out of somebody else's mouth, something that I had experienced or was feeling. Each person, a little piece here, a little piece here, a little piece here. So by the time it got to me, as you can tell, I'm not shy. By the time it got to me, I was like, there's my story. And I made a lot of really great friendships that started that night. I actually stayed involved with that organization for many years after that, long after I'd made the decision, because some of the men in that group stayed married to their wives, some divorced, some were out to their wives, some were not. It just varied. Everybody had their own comfort level. And I stayed involved in that group for many, many years after, because I wanted to be there to tell my story when that next new person walked in who needed to hear that story. Because again, I know it's going to sound melodramatic, but they literally saved my life, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. It was called the Gay Married Men Support Group. And if I look hard enough, if you want to give me your email address, I'm assuming they'd be okay with this because the group's not together anymore, but we had a kind of a credo we would reach at the beginning and I remember it would say, some of us are married, some of us are not married, but all of us come together to support each other in this part that is us. Something like that. And again, that was almost like a credo for me as I went through those years. But they had found it back in the 1980s, long before there was any other avenue for support. And I want to say it was probably around 2010 when they really weren't having anybody come to the meetings anymore, but they were getting a lot of people that reached out to them online through their Facebook page and that sort of thing. And so, the world was changing, acceptance was changing. So at some point they said, we don't really need to have the meetings anymore, but we'll still support anybody who needs. So I think the Facebook page is still there. To be honest, I don't know. I have to go look. But the nice thing is we still get together every once in a while, some of us old timers, and just do dinner somewhere and hang out and socialize. And I spoke to one of the other members who was really close to me in age the other day, and he was talking about the foibles of getting old, and he was like, oh my God, you think you're old. And it was like, aw, I guess I will always be one of the younger guys in that group. So it's always fun to think, Not very often I get to feel that way anymore. Because like I said, if I had left and not said that part, I would have gotten home and said, how could you not have given credit to the two people who really get the most, or the two things that get the most credit out of finally making me accept me, besides me, would be the Gay Married Men's Group and my ex-wife. Because, when I came out to her, we had a process to go through. But there was a point at which she said, I think we need to tear up this piece of paper between us. She said, because I don't want you to live your whole life and feel like you never got to be who you were supposed to be. And which I think was an amazingly brave and selfless thing for her to do. So that brought me closer to tears than Jagged Little Pill did this afternoon.
Did you see that?
Yeah, oh my God, it was so good.
Oh,
So good.
ready for your close up?
Not at all. Good thing I
my
shaved.
close-up, finally. My name is Elzie Barker, and I'm from Frankfort, Kentucky originally.
And I'm Joe Hornbaker, and I am from Cincinnati. I grew up in Cincinnati. Well,
We met 31 years
31
ago.
years ago. Yes.
That's how long.
And we've been married since, what is it, 5 years now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 5 years. But how did we meet?
He was on the stage.
The theater, darling, the theater. I was doing a show at NKU, which is my alma mater, the summer show. And he came to see it on opening night.
Right.
It was a little shop of horrors. And
It was Mr. Mushner.
yes, I was playing a part that was 30 years too old for me. And opening night wasn't great. And we all decided to go to Barleycorns, which used to be on the river down in the Kentucky side. And that's how we met. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yes.
That was 1992. That was the summer of 92.
Was involved for 10 or 12 years deeply with the Cincinnati Men's Chorus a few years back. Since then, not as much. We have a little bit socially and here and there, contributions maybe, but not. I wouldn't call myself overly active.
But we were with
Whatever that
we were
means.
with the men's chorus for quite some time.
Number of years.
Yeah, but we sang and both of us were on the board, although not at the same time. But that was one of our main focuses back now going 90s into the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
What was that like?
it was lovely. It was absolutely lovely. It's a great organization, and that's because it was very close to when we met. And
I joined the chorus 1 month after I moved to the city, and it meant a great deal. It still means a great deal to me. The chorus does, and so it was also an extremely powerful voice at a time when 1 year after I moved here, the city of Cincinnati passed an ordinance which basically denied us our humanity.
our existence.
It was a voice against that.
I mean, when we would sing stuff like "We're Singing for Our Lives," we really meant it. Because back in the early '90s, I mean, people think it's dark now, but it was dark. It was dark. It was dark. So yeah,
It's still dark.
It got light and then it's dark again. It wasn't friendly back in the day. There was no official ACT UP in Cincinnati, although there were people who basically used the same tactics. And I was involved in one of those protests. This was in the late 80s when ACT UP really started gearing up, in terms of HIV activism. And I remember we had a protest in front of the federal building. And we all got busted by the police because they didn't like what we were doing, even though we were exercising our constitutional rights. And that was, my introduction to being planted face down on a sidewalk with handcuffs, and the cops were wearing rubber gloves because, of course, they didn't want to, touch the diseased gay people. Oh yeah, and it was, and words to that effect, and they were not pleasant words. So, yeah, I have a vivid memory of that. And when I first came out, there was a very proto gay and lesbian group at UC, and we felt very alone because the university didn't particularly want us there either, and in fact denied us like a meeting spot, which of course you couldn't get away with today, but back in like 1980, yeah, you could kind of get away with that. So basically, we would just sort of all eat together at Tangerine University Center, and it was like there was the gay table right there. That was our meeting spot because the university preferred to think that we didn't exist. I mean, so back in the day, it wasn't paradise. Yeah, but at least there was a big enough city that there was a community. You just had to go out and find it. I mean, he grew up in a small town where that was in an era where that wasn't even possible.
Not really. Other than small house parties, there was no social scene. That was it. And I came to my fruition late, so I wouldn't have founded other places either. So,
Yeah.
How old were you when you both came out?
I guess I would have been in my late 30s.
I came out when I was 19. Basically about 1980. So, and then a year later was the famous New York Times article about the mysterious cancer among 31 homosexuals. So it was like right then. I try to tell the younger folks, it's like, I came out after Anita Bryant, but before HIV. Yeah, it was, yeah. Well, when you first moved here, it was probably just the dock, wasn't it?
The dock.
Yeah.
There was Shooters.
Oh, Shooters,
which
that's
was
right.
Another place. The
Yeah.
other place that we went a lot was on the corner, down by the court, by the city hall.
Pipeline.
Pipeline.
Plum Street Pipeline. Yeah.
Pipeline.
We went there a lot after chorus. Yeah.
This wasn't a gay bar early on, was it?
This spot? No. Because Northside.
Where we are now?
No. When I came out, the place to go, if you wanted to dance, the only place there was Badlands, which was sort of tucked away in the corner, in the dark, because of course that's where they put us. And that was the one and only time when I got gay bashed, was coming out of that bar one night, and I got jumped. And the only thing that probably saved me from getting my head kicked in, there were a couple of tough as nails drag queens who came up the steps like maybe about a minute behind me. And I mean, they went after these guys. As I recall, there were like 2 or 3 of them, and punches were thrown. And I mean, they pretty much saved me probably from getting a serious beating. And after that, the shine on Badlands was kind of off from me, because it seemed like it was kind of dicey. And there was another place up in Clifton, which doesn't exist anymore, called Just Friends. And I remember that because, as a student at UC, we would, it was this teeny little hole-in-the-wall bar on McMillan. And that was the night of the election in 1980. I was working, and I came to the bar, and I was like racing to get to the bar. And I walked in, and it was like dead silent, because Jimmy Carter had already conceded, and it was like 9:00. And it was like, all the queens are sitting there like this. And it's like, Reagan's president, and finally someone said, "Everybody drink up," because we knew what was coming. So that was a fun little neighborhood bar, but that's long since disappeared. And then we would go to the dock occasionally after we met, but we were not like, we didn't go out to a lot of bars. I mean, we did, but not.
Yeah, I think at a certain place in your life, the bar scene doesn't resonate as much as it does in a younger time. So.
Yeah.
At least not for me anyway.
Yeah.
So we're more homebodies now probably than and theater and doing things with friends and the usual stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more things now than bars.
Right.
More opportunities to make social interaction and contact.
Because back in the day, that was the only place you could go. The only place you could really feel safe. I mean,
the only place you could meet someone, really.
Right.
A person, in the flesh person.
Right. Yeah, I don't think they do that anymore, do they? It's just a
less
swipe.
And less.
It's just swipe. Yeah.
Share pictures.
Yeah.
Stand each other up.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember your first Cincinnati Pride?
I remember mine. I was telling you earlier, which was I was a student at, I guess it was at UC. It was in the early '80s, and there weren't many of us who would, and as I recall, it was downtown, but that maybe my brain is fuzzy on that. But I do remember there were many protesters on the sidewalks, and but it was like, okay, let's just march, and we did, and it was maybe for 6 blocks or something, but it had to have been sometime in the early '80s, I think, yeah.
How many people would you say were in the parade?
Maybe 50 or 100. I mean, if that. It was small. I mean, people were not really, in this town, they were not really willing to be out, It was tough. I mean, even like the first Pride you and I went to.
Well, the first Pride I went to in Cincinnati in the summer of '92, I guess.
Yeah.
There couldn't have been more than 100 people involved.
Yeah.
And no floats, no bands, just some people marching down. What was the street down by the stadium? Just that road, Pete Rose Way, I guess. That's where it was then.
Yeah.
And marched to the dock, and that's it. And there was 12 people along the route, maybe.
Yeah, it was. I remember that one too, because
it was like
extremely. It was small.
Unattended.
It was small.
Of course, now it's a very different picture, and we're all should be happy for that.
Yeah. there's certainly more corporate presence, isn't there? And I know that's controversial for a lot of people,
Yeah, how
but
do you feel about that?
well,
I say take the money where you can get it.
yeah, you know, everything's branded anyway.
Visibility
So
is
yeah,
about money.
yeah.
And you have to have money to become visible. So you just have to sometimes. I don't like it always, but it's something that's just a real part of our world, and I'm not sure you can do without it.
And you know, for
At some level.
and for the people who are part of those corporate entities like Fifth Third or P&G or you know PNC or whoever it is, and you know they've got you know their giant corporate presences there. I'm not, you know, good for them and good for the employees because you know
They deserve to be
back in the day,
recognized.
particularly like for P&G back in the day, if
Yeah.
they found out you were gay, you get fired. I mean,
Yeah.
that was, you didn't work for a company like P&G and be out. You just couldn't. And now, of course, they're just like, you know, promoting everything everywhere. And it's like, okay, yes, is it commercialized? Of course it is. But there's a trade-off. And it's like, sometimes you have to pay certain prices for enhanced, like you said, enhanced visibility. You know?
People still like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. Well, except DeSantis, but you know what?
The most overexposed
Yeah.
of us all.
Yeah. I would have a few choice words, but you'd have to edit them out. So you're not going to go there. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those deals where you can't live with them, can't live without them. I mean, it's just the reality. Once the reality changes, then it'll change.
America's all about branding and money and money. So
If we've learned one thing in the last 7 years, it's about branding.
Did you two ever feel like at any point that your jobs were at risk for your identities? Were you afraid to be out in your work?
No, actually, I never did. Of course, when I took the job here in Northern Kentucky and moved here,
What job was that?
that job, it was at NKU. I was a director of budget at the time. And I never hid myself from that. And it's a different thing when you move from one place to another. You don't have to deal with the things that you left behind. You can just be who you are in a different way. And it afforded me the opportunity just to be who I finally came to be, which was myself.
yeah.
Yeah. Never felt any concern about that.
And when we got together and I would go to events with him, there was never an issue. Not that I ever knew.
No.
I mean, nope.
So,
I mean, no.
And you never had any issues with your.
Well, I wasn't.
Your
I really
job.
wasn't sort of out at my job. I've worked for the last 36 years at the Legal Aid Society of Greater Cincinnati. I'm the database admin, and for a long time I thought I really was the only gay person there. I wasn't. There were other staff members who were. Let's put it this way: they were sort of hiding in plain sight. Nothing was ever said, and so it was really sort of after he and I got together that I was a little more out at work. But given the political leanings of my job, I mean, they're mostly progressive people who work there. It didn't feel uncomfortable, and I have never felt at all. I've been very lucky. Ever felt like my job was ever in jeopardy because of my being out. I think in that respect, both of us were very lucky with where we worked. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was an interregnum for a while. I know that because everyone just basically felt beat up by it and kind of felt like there was no way to get around this problem, And I think the first time anyone really thought that there was hope, because Colorado passed something very similar right after Cincinnati did as a state. And then right around that time, around 2000, 2001, they repealed it. And it was sort of like, wait a minute, maybe there is a possibility here. And speaking of corporate power, I think the main reason why Article 12 got repealed, the corporate entities in this city realized that it was a liability. In terms of recruitment and everything else, no one wants to come to an area where they don't feel welcome. And the corporate power in this town is palpable, but a lot of it happens, it's behind the magic curtain. And I think that's really what started to happen. There were people from P&G, from Fifth Third, from Frisch's, You know, they were saying, "Oh, you just need to stop being idiots and get rid of this shitty law." And, you know,
At least that's his opinion.
yeah, my opinion. But think about it. It finally got repealed.
Yeah, that's true.
At the same time that Ohio passed its same-sex marriage ban, remember?
Yeah.
That was when Bush ran the bloody red flag of, you know, the evil gays wanting to get married. But at the same time, Cincinnati turned around and like booted Article 12 and was like, holy shit, this could actually happen, you know? Because I honestly didn't think it would. I mean, given the inertia, the political inertia this town displayed for so long, it was like, yeah, this is never, ever going to get off the books. But I think once Colorado finally like grew a brain and it was like all of a sudden people realized, yeah, we could probably put enough pressure to make this go away. Because the original campaign, I remember when they were in '92, and the people who were trying, you know, the gay community, God love them, tried to organize as best they could. But you will never remember the yard signs that were out there. It's like you had pictures of
very bad advice.
Joe McCarthy and KKK hooded people and like Nazis. And it's like, you know, these are the people who are pushing Article 3. Well, it generated a huge backlash. It's like, if you call somebody a Nazi, they're not going to love you much, you know? And, you know, particularly for like West Side voters who come out in droves, it was a terrible idea. And luckily people, I think, learned from that mistake. You have to speak to the opposition, but you demonize them at your peril. You really do. And luckily that lesson got learned. But I remember that campaign in '92, I kept thinking, oh my God, this is not going to go well. And it didn't, you know, it just didn't.
I still have one of those yard signs.
Yeah, we have it down in our basement. Yes, we
just
do.
thought, this is historical.
We kept it. It's
What was Pride like in the 2000s? In that kind of the last 20
It
years?
was
It was fun.
It was fun. It felt exciting and a lot freer, obviously. It was
and I love the
those
Northside
early
area.
years.
And when the
This
Northside
area,
years,
this
it was
place used to
lovely.
be here.
Yeah, and it would end at Hoffner Park, and it was lovely. It was really lovely.
Yeah, I think then it just got over the years. It just got too big.
It got too
for
big
the
for
space,
Northside.
Which growth is great. So,
Yeah.
In this regard,
Yeah.
that's a good thing. So yeah, it's been it's been a fun time. We've probably attended most of the parades that have existed since they came back into being. Yeah. Yeah. Downtown
Unless it gets
is
really hot or really rainy. It's like, ugh.
we're getting older.
We're getting older now, so it's like, it's really hot or really steamy. Oh, well, it's improved tremendously.
I think in a general way, it probably just feels better. The thing about the period after '93, I don't know what, I've never really heard a report or read a report about what actual personal damage or monetary damage or anything was caused to anyone related to that proposition. But the psychic damage
was intense.
Is incredibly large. And it took a while to shape that, I think, really, after all that happened. So, but the parades have really, I think, brought people back to a space where you can feel good about who you are and be wherever you want to be.
You know, but it's
still not. There are still pockets of people around here. I mean, I wouldn't. You know, I've been called faggot on the street in the last. Well, it's probably been 10 years now, but.
And it wasn't me who said it.
No, it wasn't. No. I mean, but my point is, no place is necessarily a place to fear, but there are places that still are not safe.
Well, and here's a funny story. When he was still working at Northern, and this would have been, we'd been together a few years, we took a trip out to California, where I had spent some time as a kid, and but I hadn't been back to San Francisco since I had been a child. So we went out to San Francisco and drove around and everything, and show the rings. Okay, he'd had a set of pride rings, and he has worn those basically every day of his life for years. 30 years. And so we were in the Castro, just sort of bopping around, and because like I said, it had been decades since I'd been there, and we walked into this foofy little shop or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember what.
Yeah.
It was a foofy little shop, trust me. And there was this just insufferable little queen who was behind the counter. I'm sorry, you just wanted to smack him upside the head. And he saw Elzie's pride rings, and he got so condescending. He was like, "Oh, that's so sweet. I know you're from out of town, that you feel the need. You don't really have to wear those here." And I believe, was that the time when you actually told him?
Well,
You said,
I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "So that explains the gay bashing that took place 2 blocks from here the night before last."
that was like front page news of the San Francisco Chronicle. And we looked at him, it's like, you may think you're living in the gay pavilion at Epcot, but here's the deal, sweetie. There were a bunch of kids who drove over the Bay Bridge to go hunting queers and beat the fuck out of somebody 2 blocks from here. So, like, grow up, you know? And of course, she clutched the pearls. And she's like, we're like, have a lovely day. And then we walked out. But it's like, you know, don't condescend to us. It's like,
Well, I do, but I understand the sentiment.
Right.
It is easy when you're in a comfortable space to be comfortable.
right.
And it's only when you come
Or to be
out of that
delusional,
comfortable
yeah.
space or go into one where you're not quite as comfortable that you feel the difference.
Yeah.
So when you've lived in an uncomfortable space for a long time,
Yeah.
you know how to tell
Yeah.
when it's not very comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we've got friends who live in New York, and it's, you know, yes, is it easier to be out in New York? Of course it is. But does that mean you don't face issues? That's not true. There are always issues. And I think given the current hideous political environment that has now suddenly spun itself up again, it's like past is, you know, present again, particularly, you know, the attacks on the trans community, the attacks on the drag community. It's like, Jesus Christ, not this again, you know. But when you have empty political rhetoric that has nowhere to go, talk about demonizing, you demonize because you have nothing else to say or do. And it's just like, God, we've seen this movie before. I was talking to one of our younger staff members. She's probably in her mid-20s. And we were just discussing this whole thing in Tennessee and the hideous law that just got passed in Frankfurt, and, you know, this past week. And I said, you know, I've been through this movie before. I've seen it. I said, I really honestly thought we would not have to live long enough to see this again. And yet, here we are.
Don't get comfortable.
Yeah, don't be complacent.
I mean, there's the specific actions depend on the specific situation or what you're dealing with, but just don't get complacent. Because things
we're
our
seeing
political
it.
system proves that our courts will undo things that we thought could never be
undone.
So pay attention. That would be the advice I'd give to anyone in Cincinnati. In the
Or
gay
anywhere,
community.
pay attention.
Pay attention.
Know what's going on around you, and understand that, you know, it's not just somebody else's fight. I mean,
And I would sum it up by saying, never forget that the fact that you are gay is in of itself in this culture a political act.
every day you wake up, you're
You are
politics.
You are a political issue. As long as you remember that and understand how it can affect you, we'll be okay.
Yeah,
I think that's my hope,
yeah.
my belief. Yes.
I'm glad I got to spend them with him.
Well, me too. This has been a great 30 years, the best 30 years of my life.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
My name is Jeffrey Johnson. I currently live in Cincinnati and Northside. I grew up in a small town called Hillsboro, Ohio. Moved here went to college for 4 years, left, went back to my hometown, and came back in 1999 for work and have been here since. I identify as gay, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I actually went to Cincinnati Bible College and then went back home and then came back here for work, and yeah, mind was opened. I worked for Hamilton County Educational Service Center as a sign language interpreter. I was there for just over 30 years. I retired in 2020 when COVID, all that was going on. I decided I didn't want to go back into school. I had enough years to retire, so I went ahead and retired. And I'm just doing freelance and have no regrets. Loving it. When I came back to for work, I was not really out yet, but my roommate at the time was. He kind of helped bring me out of my shell and helped me to, come out. Well, because of him, and I had some gay friends, I felt okay because they knew kind of where the places are to go and everything. And I think at that time they were still kind of behind the times, but I feel like they have kind of caught up a little bit. Yes. Oh, where I used to hang out? Okay. It was, we always kind of call it the little gay loop, or I did. There's a place called Hamburger Mary's. We used to go there. We have cocktails, maybe have dinner, then we'd go out, leave, and then we'd go to a place called Spurs, and then Pipeline, and then maybe back to Hamburger Mary's, or sometimes there's a place called Simon Says. We might go there. We just kind of made a little loop, and a lot of those places aren't gone now, sadly. My first Cincinnati Pride, I think it was 99, or probably 2000, because I didn't move to Cincinnati until after Pride in 99, so it was probably 2000. And it was actually here in Northside. And they met at Burnett Woods and did a little thing, and then they would, the parade would come over to Hoffner Park. And it was several years later that I started coordinating interpreters for Cincinnati Pride. It was probably the last 2 years that it was in Northside that I started, and then they moved downtown. And I've been coordinating interpreters for Pride ever since. So luckily I have some awesome interpreters who are willing, and they're like, when's Pride? I want to interpret. So I've been lucky in that account. It has definitely grown a lot. As far as interpreters, when we were here in Northside, it was 2 or 3 of us, and that's about all we needed. Now I get anywhere from probably 10 to 15 interpreters, and that's just for the festival during the day. So, and again, just so glad I have willing interpreters to come and do it for me. I think it's good that it's family oriented, because then it's, I think kids need to know all about it as much as adults. It's not something that should be hidden, but I feel like people can still be themselves there and not have to worry about, being, looked at differently or anything like that. But I think it's definitely made major improvements. But yeah, it's been good. I think there has been I think it definitely has changed. I feel like there's many more places that are more welcoming for the gay community or the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done, but I feel like we've really come very far. And I feel like I don't feel like I have to, quote, hide as much as I did, or have to be, as cautious about, somebody saying something. Because now it's kind of like I could probably, if I had a boyfriend and wanted to hold hands walking down the street, I think I could, and it would be okay. Whereas before, you'd probably get some comments or stares. I worked in the school, so I never hid it, but I never rushed out and just ran in the room saying, "Hey, I'm gay." I just, if I was asked, I would say yes. Or if they're like, do you have a wife? I'm like, no, I don't, but I have a husband. So, and luckily, I've never experienced any type of trouble or anything in the workplace. In my office, or where I worked, the agency I worked with, I never felt uncomfortable with them. They knew, and they never questioned it. They accepted me, and I know other there were others who were out, and it was never a problem, thankfully. There was one time I used to live in OTR, and I was out going somewhere, and there's like these like 4 or 5 little, probably teenagers, young adults or whatever, who did actually attack me. And I don't think didn't do anything to try to get money or anything. So I feel like it was because I think they kind of noticed I was probably gay, and they attacked me, and they started hitting, and I just started hitting right back. Kept thinking, don't fall down, just stay up, and they never went for my pockets, never did anything. It was like they were just trying to beat me up. And I fought back, and I dropped the phone. I had my phone in my hand, and I dropped it, and they weren't even going after that till I dropped it, and one guy picked it up, and I chased after him, chased him across the street, and the truck was coming down the street and blocked me. So, and then he ran off. But that, and I mean, there's been times I've been walking, I've heard comments and stuff, but I just kind of ignore those and go on. But I have to say, recently, I've not really experienced anything like that recently. So it's been a while.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear.
So, but yeah, I'm like, yeah, you can beat me up, but I'm gonna right back at you. Let's see, that was probably, I was still living in OTR, so I would say maybe around 2008, between 2008 2010, right around that time. Yeah.
Do you remember Cincinnati Pride after marriage equality was passed in 2015?
Oh yeah, I remember that year. It was like, it was a big celebration. I think that might have been the year where they actually had couples who, if they want to get married, to actually had like a huge mass wedding type thing. I think it was that. I may be wrong, but I think it was that year. But couples that wanted to get married, they came up to the main stage, and they had an officiant there and they got married. It was fantastic. Yeah, I definitely remember that year, because it was like, yeah, it was so much excitement. I've marched in a parade once or twice, but usually, but with having more interpreters, I was usually so busy trying to get all that together, I really didn't have a chance to march in the parade. I barely get to watch the parade. But I enjoy what I'm doing though. So, and again, the interpreters I work with are fantastic. I can just say, this is what you're doing. You're from here this time to this time, and they show up, and I'm like, here's your music, and they just do it, and they're fantastic. If they're not LGBTQ themselves, they're allies. And yeah, and they ask, when is Pride next year? I want to come back. So yeah, I need to give them big kudos. Oh yeah, so you do happy Pride.